Yesterday, we took into custody a 55-year-old SeaTac man who is suspected of the 1987 murders of Jay Cook and Tanya Van Cuylenborg. William Earl Talbot II has been booked into the Snohomish County Jail on one count of first-degree murder on a warrant out of Skagit County. We took him into custody yesterday around 6 p.m. in Seattle without incident. Today, he will be transported to the Skagit County Jail.
November 18, 1987. A ferry cuts through cold Pacific water, moving from Sydney, British Columbia toward Port Angeles, Washington. On board, two young people from a quiet Canadian island town sit together, probably talking the way new couples do, making small plans, laughing about nothing important, completely unaware that the water beneath them is carrying them toward something no one on that ferry could have imagined. She was 18 years old. He was 20. And by the time that ferry docked on the other side, the world they knew was already ending. Tanya Van Cuylenborg had just finished high school in Saanich, British Columbia, a calm, tree-lined community on Vancouver Island where families knew each other and danger felt like something that happened somewhere else. She was at that specific age where everything feels wide open. School was done. The future was unwritten. And she was in love for the first time, the kind of love that makes ordinary Tuesday evenings feel like something worth remembering. She brought her Minolta X700 camera on the trip. That detail matters. Remember it. Jay Cook was 20 years old, the only son in his family, the kind of young man whose mother trusted completely. His relationship with Tanya was only 6 months old, but both families had already seen something real between them. Jay's father needed heater parts picked up from Genco Heating in Seattle. Jay volunteered. And instead of making it just an errand, he turned it into something more. One night away. Just the two of them. A small adventure wrapped inside a practical task. That was the whole plan. Pick up the parts. Sleep one night in the family's old van. Drive home the next morning. Simple. Safe. Ordinary. Hi viewers. Here is a question for you. Have you ever taken a trip that started as something completely ordinary but turned into something you will never forget? Drop your answer in the comments below.
State of Washington versus William Earl Talbot II, verdict form 1. We, the jury, find the defendant, William Earl Talbot II, guilty of the crime of first-degree murder as charged in count 1.
I didn't do it.
Verdict form 2. We, the jury, find the defendant, William Earl Talbot II, guilty of the crime of first-degree murder as charged in count 2.
They boarded the first ferry from Sydney to Port Angeles and then transferred to the second one, Bremerton to Seattle, boarding at 10:16 in the evening. The ferry docked in Seattle at approximately 11:30 at night. Passengers walked off. The city swallowed them whole. And from that moment forward, no one who loved them ever saw either of them alive again. No phone calls came that night. The next morning, Genco Heating opened its doors. No one walked in to collect the heater parts. The order sat unclaimed on a shelf. By evening, when Jay and Tanya should have already been home, both families in Saanich sat next to phones that refused to ring. These were not the kind of young people who disappeared without a word. Jay was responsible. Tanya was close with her family. Something was wrong, and the people who loved them knew it in the specific, sick way that parents and siblings know things before they are told. Both families contacted police immediately. The search began. But Jay and Tanya were not in Canada anymore. They were somewhere in the state of Washington, in a place where their families had no connections, no contacts, no map, and no starting point. Two Canadian families standing on one side of a border, searching for two young people on the other side, with nothing to go on and everything to lose. What followed would stretch across 31 years. More than 200 leads that went nowhere. Serial killers investigated and eliminated. a detective who gave nearly a quarter-century of his career to two people he never met.
Yesterday, we took into custody a 55-year-old SeaTac man who is suspected of the 1987 murders of Jay Cook and Tanya Van Cuylenborg. William Earl Tabbitt II has been booked into the Snohomish County Jail on one count of first-degree murder on a warrant out of Skagit County. We took him into custody yesterday around 6 p.m. in Seattle without incident. Today, he will be transported to the Skagit County Jail. In a minute, Sheriff Reichert will provide you additional details on that part of the process. Talbot was identified as a suspect through the process of genealogy. With us today are Steve Armentrout and CeCe Moore from Parabound Nanolabs. CeCe is the genetic genealogist who worked on the case, and she is here with us today on Skype. Steve and CeCe will provide details how the suspect's DNA, which was collected in 1987 at the scene of Tanya's murder, was used to identify his ancestors, which in turn led us to the identification of Talbot.
Anonymous letters that terrorized the families for over 2 decades. And then, at the very end, something that had never happened before in the history of criminal investigation anywhere in the world. A complete stranger, sitting at her kitchen table in Tumwater, Washington, building a hobby family tree, uploaded her DNA to a website. She had never heard the names Jay Cook or Tanya Van Cuylenborg. She was not trying to solve anything. She was simply curious about her own roots. 2 hours after a genetic genealogist ran that DNA through a database of 1 million profiles, a name appeared that would shock an entire community. But to understand how a stranger's family tree ended a 31-year hunt, you first have to understand what happened on the night that ferry docked in Seattle, and what was left behind in the darkness that followed. 6 days of silence. 6 days where 2 families in Saanich, British Columbia waited by their phones, spoke to investigators, and held onto the fragile possibility that Jay and Tanya were simply somewhere unreachable, somewhere with a perfectly reasonable explanation attached to it. 6 days. Then November 24th arrived. A passerby on a rural road near Alger, in Skagit County, Washington, spotted something beside the road. Down an embankment. Tanya Van Cuylenborg, 18 years old, 6 days out of reach, was found in that roadside ditch. She had been shot in the back of the head. Her hands were bound behind her back with plastic zip ties. She had been assaulted before she was killed. She was 18 years old. She had brought a camera to document the trip. That same day, Tanya's wallet and her keys were found discarded near the Greyhound bus station in Bellingham, Washington. The Cook family van was located in a parking lot in downtown Bellingham, just blocks away. Inside, police found plastic gloves, more zip ties of the same kind used to bind Tanya, receipts, the Bremerton to Seattle ferry ticket confirming the couple had made that crossing on the night of November 18th, and one more item. Tanya's black pants, the one she had been wearing the night she was killed. Left behind by whoever had taken everything else. The Minolta X700 camera was not there. It was gone. Taken. And it has never been found.
Special verdict form 1, aggravating circumstances. We, the jury, having found the defendant guilty of premeditated murder in the first degree on verdict form 1, return a special verdict by answering as follows. Agreed. Answer, yes. Special verdict form 2, aggravating circumstances.
I'm going to ask you each in turn to say your verdicts and if the other verdicts after juries. I'm going to start with jury number 1. Are these your verdicts? Three?
They are.
Jury number 3, are these your verdicts? And are they the verdicts of the jury?
Jay was still missing. The Cook family was still holding on, the way families do when they have no confirmation of the worst, believing that maybe there was still a version of this story where Jay came home. November 26th ended that. Jay Cook's body was found beneath a high bridge in Snohomish County, nearly 60 miles south of where Tanya had been discovered, near the Monroe Honor Farm. He had not been shot. He had been struck with a rock, strangled with twine and 2 red dog collars. A pack of cigarettes had been forced into his throat after he died, a detail that served no practical purpose, something deliberately cruel and symbolic. Zip ties of the same type found with Tanya were also discovered near his body. 2 victims. 2 locations, 60 miles apart. 2 completely different methods. 1 killer. The matching zip ties were the thread connecting everything. The same type, found with both of them, linking 2 separate crime scenes across 4 counties. King County, where Jay and Tanya were last seen alive. Skagit County, where Tanya was found. Whatcom County, where the van was recovered. Snohomish County, where Jay was found. The killer had moved through all of it deliberately, scattering evidence, scattering the bodies, creating jurisdictional chaos that crossed multiple law enforcement boundaries. This was not random panic. This was someone who knew how to move. From the biological evidence recovered from Tanya's black pants, forensic scientists built a DNA profile. They called him Individual A. This profile did not match Jay Cook. It did not match anyone in any available criminal database. In 1987, DNA profiling had only been used in a criminal investigation for the first time the year before. Without a matching profile already sitting in a database, it was essentially a fingerprint with no hand attached to it. Individual A was out there. Living. Moving. Breathing. And in the earliest days of the investigation, something happened that sent the case in a direction it never should have gone. Jay Cook was the last known person with Tanya. His family's van was in Bellingham. His body had not yet been found. For a brief window of time, Jay himself was considered a suspect. Both families rejected this furiously. Then Jay's body was found under that bridge. Bound. Killed. The same zip ties. Suspicion against Jay collapsed completely. There was a third person. Someone who had crossed paths with them after the ferry docked, left DNA behind, and walked away into a life that left no record in any criminal database. Individual A had a profile. Individual A had no name. Jim Schoff was a detective with Snohomish County when he first picked up the case file in 1995, 8 years after the murders. He helped establish a cold case investigation team that year, and this case was among the first the team examined. He looked at everything. The ferry tickets. The zip ties. The 4 counties. The DNA profile sitting in a folder with no match attached to it. And he said something he would repeat, in almost exactly the same words, for the next 23 years. This is probably the most terrible unsolved case we have. He was not family to Tanya or Jay. He had no personal obligation beyond his professional duty. But something in that file attached itself to him in the way certain cases attach themselves to certain people. Beyond logic. Beyond job description. He did not let it go. Over the following years, more than 200 names crossed his desk. Tips. Leads. Theories. Confessions from people who had nothing to do with it. Each one followed. Each one investigated. Each one arriving at the same wall. 2 names rose above the rest. Robert Yates and Charles Sinclair, both active in the Seattle area during the same period, both capable of being placed geographically near the right locations. Schoff investigated both thoroughly. DNA results came back for both. Neither matched Individual A. Then the letters started. Beginning approximately 1 month after the murders, the families of Jay Cook and Tanya Van Cuylenborg began receiving anonymous letters from someone claiming to be responsible for what happened. The letters arrived over the years, postmarked from different locations. Think about what that means for a moment. These families were already living through something no family should survive. And someone was making it worse on purpose, year after year, letter after letter. Police pursued the letter writer as a parallel investigation for over 2 decades. It was not answered until 2010, when a tip threw Washington's most wanted led investigators to a Canadian man in his 70s with severe mental illness who had heard about the case on the news in 1987 and had been writing the letters ever since.
It was just a few weeks ago that I stood before you when we released composite images of what the suspect may have looked like based on DNA markers. Since then, we've received over 100 tips related to this case, and I really want to thank everyone that called in with information. Unfortunately, with Talbot in custody, the investigation still has more work to be done. Skagit and Snohomish County detectives are looking to speak with anyone who knew Talbot or knew of his activities in 1987 or 1988.
He had no connection to the murders. No connection to Jay or Tanya. No connection to individual A. 23 years. Chasing a ghost with no relevance to the case. While that was happening, individual A was somewhere in Washington state, living a life, waking up every morning as a free man. In 2003, Schoff uploaded individual A's DNA profile to CODIS, the National Criminal Database. No match. Individual A had never been arrested for anything. He had never entered the system. The clearest biological evidence a person can leave behind, attached to nothing and no one. Leona Cook was still alive. Still waiting. Schoff kept going. Through the late 2000s and into the 2010s, he watched DNA technology evolve in ways that had seemed impossible when he first picked up that file. In 2017, 30 years after the ferry left Victoria, he contacted Parabon Nanolabs, a forensic company in Virginia specializing in DNA phenotyping, the technique of analyzing DNA to predict the physical appearance of whoever carries it. For the first time in 3 decades, Schoff had something resembling a face. But a face is not a name. Parabon then introduced Schoff to CeCe Moore, who had just been appointed to lead their newly formed genealogy division. What she was about to do with individual A's profile had never been done before in a criminal investigation anywhere in the world. But before Moore could do any of it, the piece she needed had already been put in place. 3 years earlier. By someone who had absolutely no idea she was doing it. Chelsea Rustad lived in Tumwater, Washington. She was not a detective. She had never heard the names Jay Cook or Tanya Van Cuylenborg. In 2015, she bought a consumer DNA test kit, collected a saliva sample, and uploaded her results to GEDmatch, a public website where users share genetic profiles to find distant relatives and build family trees. She was simply curious about her own roots. That was the entire reason. In 2018, CeCe Moore uploaded individual A's DNA to GEDmatch and searched through approximately 1 million profiles that people like Chelsea Rustad had voluntarily placed there. She was looking for anyone sharing enough genetic material with individual A to place them within the same family tree. Not a direct match. A distant relative. Anyone connected by blood to the man who had left that DNA behind 31 years ago. She found 2. Moore built the family tree backward from those 2 distant relatives, tracing common ancestors, then following every branch forward, eliminating individuals based on gender, age, and geography. Branch by branch. Name by name. 2 hours. From 1 million profiles to 1 name. William Earl Talbot II. Monroe, Washington. 11 kilometers from the bridge where Jay Cook's body had been found. Age 24 in November 1987. A delivery driver who had worked routes through the Seattle area and had been let go from that job just months before the murders, leaving him with no fixed schedule, intimate knowledge of those roads, and nowhere he was required to be. Schoff located Talbot's former roommate. The roommate described a blue blanket in Talbot's home and truck that year, similar to the one found near Jay's body. He described a volatile, unpredictable side to Talbot, particularly when drinking. And then the detail that stopped the room. He had been to the area near that high bridge before the murders. Talbot had taken him there. Talbot knew it. But genetic genealogy is an investigative lead, not courtroom evidence. Schoff needed Talbot's actual DNA obtained legally, without tipping him off. So they watched him. For several days, Schoff's team conducted surveillance on Talbot, now 55 and still working as a truck driver. They waited for the moment he discarded something that had made natural contact with his DNA. At a red light, a coffee cup fell from his truck. The team collected it immediately. It went directly to the Washington State Patrol Laboratory that same day. Forensic scientist Lisa Collins compared the DNA from that coffee cup against individual A's profile, the same profile that had sat in a case file since 1987, attached to no name for over 3 decades. Lisa Collins cried when she read the result. Perfect match. 1 in 180 quadrillion. Individual A had a name. William Earl Talbot II. On May 18, 2018, the Snohomish County Sheriff's Office announced the arrest. Talbot was 55 years old. A middle-aged truck driver. Someone his community had passed on the road without a second thought. A man who had lived a visible, ordinary life for 31 years while 2 families in British Columbia waited for an answer he carried with him every single day. He pleaded not guilty. The trial opened in June 2019 in Everett, Washington. It was not only a trial about 1987. It was a trial about the future of criminal investigation. This was one of the first cases anywhere in the world where genetic genealogy was presented as evidence before a jury. The defense attacked it directly, challenging whether CeCe Rustad's DNA could legally and ethically be used to identify a suspect without her knowledge or consent. The court allowed the evidence. A precedent was set. The defense argued consensual contact between Talbot and Tanya, with an unnamed third party responsible for both deaths. The prosecution dismantled it. Tanya was 18, on her first trip away with her boyfriend, in a foreign country for a specific errand. She was on her period. No version of events supported a voluntary encounter with a stranger. And the zip ties told the rest. Same type. Both victims. 2 locations 60 miles apart. 1 killer. No other explanation existed. On June 28, 2019, the jury delivered the verdict. Guilty. 2 counts of first-degree murder with aggravating circumstances. The families held each other in that courtroom. Leona Cook, who had waited longer than most people wait for anything, said they were moving toward something that resembled closure. But she still did not have her only son. John Van Cuylenborg said they had more answers than they had received in 31 years. And that, he said, was huge. July 2019. 2 consecutive life sentences without parole. 1 for Tanya. 1 for Jay. Then in December 2021, the Washington Court of Appeals overturned the conviction. Not because the DNA was flawed. A juror had given insufficient answers about their own impartiality during selection and had been allowed to remain. The Court of Appeals concluded that a constitutionally impartial jury could not be guaranteed. The verdict could not stand. The families had believed it was finally over. Now they were being told it might not be. Then on December 23, 2022, the Washington State Supreme Court issued its ruling. The appeal was rejected entirely. The conviction was reinstated in full. The reasoning was precise. The defense had possessed the legal right during jury selection to remove that juror. They chose not to use it. A legal team cannot lose a trial and then appeal a condition they had the tools to prevent. 2 life sentences. Reinstated. Unappealable. Final. What this case left behind reached far past that courtroom. CeCe Moore's method was adopted across the United States and beyond. Dozens of frozen cold cases were resolved using the same approach. Among them, Joseph James DeAngelo, the Golden State Killer, arrested just weeks after Talbot, also through genetic genealogy, confirming this was not a miracle but the beginning of a new era entirely. And then there is CeCe Rustad. A woman who did nothing wrong. Who simply wanted to know where she came from. When investigators contacted her, she was told a member of her extended family was being investigated for a double murder. She had not consented to being part of any investigation. She had not known she was doing anything beyond satisfying curiosity. Her DNA, and through it the genetic threads connecting her to relatives she may never have met, had been used to identify a killer without her knowledge. The question her innocent action raised has no clean answer yet. When you share your DNA, are you also sharing something that belongs to every person related to you? Where does genetic privacy end? Who decides what your biological information can be used for, even when the purpose is justice? This case placed those questions before the entire world. Jay Cook and Tanya Van Cuylenborg boarded a ferry on the evening of November 18, 1987. Young. In love. Carrying a camera and a simple plan. The photos from that Minolta X700 were never taken. The camera left with the man who was never supposed to walk free and was never recovered. The ordinary morning drive home never happened. But a detective refused to close a file for 23 years. A scientist narrowed 1 million profiles to one name in 2 hours. A stranger uploaded her DNA to satisfy her own curiosity and handed investigators the key they had been searching for since 1987. In a courtroom in Everett, Washington, confirmed and sealed in December 2022, Jay Cook and Tanya Van Cuylenborg were finally heard. 31 years late. But heard. If this story stayed with you, make sure you are subscribed so you do not miss what comes next. Because the next case on this channel involves a family that reported their loved one missing, a search that lasted years, and a discovery so close to home that investigators still describe it as one of the most unsettling moments of their careers. The detail that broke the case open was something the family had looked at every single day without knowing what they were seeing. You will not want to miss it.